of the great duo. But I defy you not to break into a huge grin every time you hear, "Hello, I'm Julian, and this is my friend Sandy." They're just fantastically funny.
Well, listener, here it is, out in the open at last.
Out now.
The memoirs of Julian and Sandy. The full story now, it can be told. We shall blurt it all out. Yes. We shall be fearless and probing. We shall rip the lid off.
Hello, heart faces. Dolly Pallone, Maureen Lipman here with a bijou programmette that will indeed unfold the boner history of Julian and Sandy. They were the most loved and successful characters in Round the Horn, which was perhaps the most popular radio comedy series of all time. We shall delve into how Julian and Sandy, played by Hugh Paddick and Kenneth Williams, were created, why the BBC let them on the air at all, and how come two outrageously gay characters were so loved at a time when men were being imprisoned for being gay. And loved by the public they were. At the height of its popularity in the late 1960s, Round the Horn had over 8 million Omis, Pallones and Omi Pallones tuning in religiously every Sunday lunchtime. By the way, heart faces, if you're having trouble keeping up with the Polari, there's nanty worry, 'cause shortly there will be your actual full Polari lesson, explaining all the bon mots and their fantabulosa and sometimes rather risque meanings. But first things first, a healthy reminder, or if you're a Jules and Sand virgin, and there can't be many of them left in Earl's Court, a salacious sketchette that'd make your riot curl. Preceded by Hugh Paddock and Round the Horn regular Betty Marsden, describing the reaction they got every time they showed their eeks to the gathered faithful.
Hello, I'm Julian and this is my friend Sandy.
Hello, Mr.
That sequence, when it became established, was one of the most amazing things, because it didn't matter what the content of the sketch was going to be. As soon as I said, "Oh, hello, my name's Julian,"
It just fell down.
The roof used to come in.
Hello, anybody there?
Oh, hello, I'm Julian and this is my friend Sandy.
Hello, Mr.
How do you eat?
Oh, darling.
Oh, how nice. What brings you trolling in here, then?
Well, are you a private detective?
Private and confidential. We specialise in delicate inquiries.
Delicato. Put yourself into our hands unreservedly.
Are you qualified?
Oh, yes. I'm ex-Sid.
SID, Criminal Investigation Department.
No, Sid Goat's Breath. That was my name, but I had it changed. Now I'm Julian Lestrange.
After that inspection, the Sherlock Holmes, he's modelled himself on him, haven't you, on that Sherlock Holmes?
Yes.
He loves Holmes, don't you, Julian?
Oh, I love Holmes. Yes. I read all his tales.
He loves Holmes' tales.
Read them all.
He does.
Yellow Eek, Crooked Omi, the Red Riley.
He sees himself as the Sherlock of the over 60s. He does.
Sort of old people's home. Well, yes, it's true. I'm being threatened.
We can give all the protection you need. We give 3 grades of protection. They're comprehensive at 80 guineas a week. That includes armed guards at your side, night and day, a professional food taster, and a ravenous Alsatian stationed outside your door.
Or there's your partial cover.
Partial?
Plainclothes man outside your window.
Partial?
Telephone interception service and a wire-haired terrier on the landing. That's 50 guinea a week.
Well, that's more than I planned on spending.
Oh, there's your 4 guinea ordinary.
Well, how does that protect me from attack?
Jules restrains himself.
How did Julian and Sandy get invented? Well, it was 1965, Round the Horn had been running for a short while, and the writers, Barry Took and Marty Feldman, always looking for fresh new ideas, came up with 2 very old ones, as Barry Took explains.
We had written 2 old gentlemen, 2 old actors. They were terribly booming, old boys, that was the sort of thing. And in those days it was quite commonplace for out-of-work actors to do housework between engagements. And we thought that it would be funny, these 2 old theatrical chaps going to Kenneth Horne to do his washing up and the rest of it. "Ah, is this a squeegee I see before me? Its handle against my hand. Come, let me clutch thee." All that stuff. So we thought that was so funny. It went into the script and off it went to the producer, who, like Churchill, had days of black dog where he'd done nothing funny at all. And he didn't like them at all. He said, "These 2 old chaps are too sad. They're much too sad. The poor old boys having to do housework. Make them chorus boys."
Hello, we're from Rent-A-Chat. I'm Julian, this is my friend Sandy.
That's right, we've come to do for you. Yeah, that's never Kenneth Orr.
It is.
Oh, now for cold, doesn't he? I wonder if they're his own teeth.
Ask him.
Oh, I don't like.
Oh, go on.
No.
Look, I heard what you said.
Oh, he was earwigging.
Have you just popped round to make comments on my personal appearance, or are you going to do the housework?
Well, we're 7 or 6 an hour, you know.
Yeah, not cheap.
Did Miss Brahms at the agency warn you?
Yes, we agreed terms. Now, quick, come in before the neighbours see you. Now, let me show you what I want doing. Through here's the kitchen.
No, I'm afraid not.
No.
Kitchen sink isn't us. No, we're more of your drawing room comedy.
Well, do the best you can. Here's the dishcloth.
We couldn't wash up in here. All the dishes are dirty.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I'm sorry. I'd have washed up if I'd known.
Well, it's the grease, you see. It turns his stomach over.
Well, I wouldn't want to upset him at all. Perhaps you better start on the living room.
Oh, yes, that's much more. Oh, look, Sandy, a parquet floor. Oh, boner. Oh, I wish I'd known. Oh, if I'd known, I'd have brought me tap shoes.
Julian and Sandy there in their first ever outing, Rent-A-Chap. Marty Feldman and Barry Took chose the names Julian and Sandy because of two people well known in theatreland, the writers Sandy Wilson, whose musical The Boyfriend, and Julian Slade, whose musical Salad Days, had made them both household names. We went trolling not far off the Fulham Road, I kid you not, to ask the real Julian and Sandy what they thought about having these outrageous West End Wendy's named after them.
I didn't find out until some years later, as a matter of fact, that they'd been named after me. I used to listen to the programme, but it never occurred to me that they'd actually been named after either of us.
I really had no idea that it was anything to do with us whatsoever. And my mother and I had been listening to this programme for ages. And we were laughing over it. And one day my mother said to me, "Do you know, it's the most extraordinary coincidence." And I said, "Oh, I don't think it means anything, Mama."
I happened to meet Monty Feldman. In fact, he came back here with his wife for a drink. And the first thing he did was to apologise to me. And I said, "What are you apologising for?" And he said, "Oh, didn't you know?" I said, "No, I'm afraid not." You didn't even apologise to me. And I was rather baffled by the fact that he felt he had to apologise to me. For what? My reaction now is slightly irritated, because at the time I happened to know Hugh Paddock and Kenneth Williams very well. They were both in shows of mine, and I think at least one of them might have rung me up and said, "Look, we're calling ourselves Julian and Sandy. Do you mind?" I would have said, "Okay, if you want to."
There's no doubt that Round the Horn was well written and had versatile and comically skilled performers, but that doesn't explain why Julian and Sandy soon became the highlight of the shows. Truth to tell, it was very surprising that the public didn't seem to have a problem with two screaming queens as the centrepiece of their favourite comedy series. I mean, this was 1965. Practising homosexuality was illegal, and the blackmailing of closeted married men and confirmed bachelors was rife. But on another level, it's quite understandable. After all, the swinging 60s were well underway. Pearl Carr and Teddy Johnson hadn't had a hit for quite a while, and flowers were being worn in places other than your buttonhole or creeping up your trellis. So how come the public took Julian and Sandy to their hearts? Sandy Wilson and Kenneth Williams have their ideas, as does Barry Took.
The whole point about Julian and Sandy, the homosexuality is neither here nor there. It's unimportant. They were chorus boys. We made them chorus boys. They were obviously gay. That's what chorus boys were. Being gay hadn't come down in a shower of rain that afternoon. It had been going on since the dawn of time. So what's so strange about it? And people don't really give a damn about sexual attitudes and behaviour. They know that they themselves had oddities, and they accept other people's oddities in the sexual line.
What Barry Took and Marty Feldman were doing is to make these two outrageous characters funny because of the manic insistence of the one making the other confess. So the one would say, well, I went in, Miss Strawn. And I said, yes, you went in, go on. Well, Miss Strawn, I went in, and he said, yes, what did he say? Go on, what did he say? Go on, tell him what he said. Well, he got hold of me, and he said, yes, go on, what did he say about your eyebrows? Well, he said, you could do with plucking, yes, Miss Strawn. And this other one kept pushing the other one into terrible confessions, you see, which, I mean, they weren't really terrible at all when you actually work them out. And life is full of such people.
The fact that homosexuality was illegal at the time gave it an added mystery or frisson because it was naughty. I don't think for a minute anyone was shocked by it. Particularly the working classes, they love all that sort of thing, you know.
It was the acceptance of Kenneth Horne as well. I mean, he was us, and he didn't mind, we don't mind, is really the feeling. The secret of Julian and Sandy is that they are cheerful, outgoing people, and there's no hint of sadness or horror in the situation.
The general public couldn't get enough of Julian and Sandy, but it must have been rather strange for gay men at the time to hear an exaggerated version of themselves being celebrated while they still had to hide in the shadows. Betty Bourne, who was an actor with a significantly butcher name in the late 60s, and for many years has run a drag theatre company, Blue Lips, remembers only too well what life was like for gay men in the late 60s, and recalls one occasion in particular which captures the changing attitudes to homosexuality. By the way, a cottage, in the way Betty uses it here, has rather less to do with thatched roofs and riverbanks, and rather more to do with iron hoofs and armitage shanks, as it refers to convenient encounters in public conveniences.
Well, you learned a very skillful way of just not giving anything away at all. You had to be careful how long your fingernails were. You had to be careful what kind of shoes you wore. Nothing too camp. In those days, you very much tried to conform. I remember someone throwing me over because I wasn't butch enough. You're not really butch, he said to me. I looked like someone out of West Side Story chorus. Well, in those days was very butch. And even if you lived in a little village in the back of Hicksville, you know, and you happened to be listening to it on the crystal set, you know, or with your bedroom door locked and it on very, very softly, you still had Julian and Sandy giving you courage, mon ami.
How about Dundee, Jules?
Yes, I could let myself go in Dundee.
Yes, he could let himself go in Dundee, he could.
Take John Gielgud, who was caught in a cottage. You know, he's now 97, still working, bless him. Caught in a cottage, appearing in a play with Dame Sybil Thorndike, and it was all over the press in the evenings, and when it came to his entrance, he was so terrified he didn't come on, and she went off into the wings, and she brought him down centre of the stage, and she said, ladies and gentlemen, John Gielgud, and they just all went crazy. They stood up and cheered, and so that the issue was over as far as, you know, they were concerned, and it was like a wonderful kind of support. I always found that story incredibly moving. This very old woman just saving this person in a way.
So attitudes to gays were changing, and what also helped these provocative characters to be accepted was that they were obviously no threat. After all, Julian and Sandy weren't exactly going to steal your husband or demand equality. And when it came to trying to impress us, well, they were dead naff at practically everything.
Oh, it's lovely. Then he does the dance of the dying goose.
Well, I'd like to see him.
Yes.
Do you think he'd do it for me now?
Ask him, Ducky, ask him.
All right. Would you die for me?
Oh, gladly.
There he goes, you see, there he goes. You see, there he goes, he's dying. He's dying now. Look at him flapping away there. Oh, flap. Go on, girl, go on, flap. Oh, no, it's very pathetic, though, isn't it?
Yeah, you took the word right out of my mouth.
There he goes, he's going. He's going, yes, he's going, he's ebbing away. No, wait a minute, he's coming back. Oh, yeah, oh, no, he's going again, he's going. Look the way he's all curled up there. Curled up like a little ball. Ah, bless him. Yeah, what's that?
Got me beak caught up me trapdoor.
And then we come to their trump card, the main key to their success, sex. Well, when I said sex, I didn't really mean sex. I meant more your actual innuendo. The British have always loved it, because people didn't have sex on radio in 1965. Barry Took remembers it's what kept them on the air.
I think people didn't dare admit that they knew what Julian and Sandy were about. The suited wonders of the hierarchy of the BBC. Well, I don't know what we're going to object to in this, because if we kind of reveal things in our own personality and nature, and there's George up the corridor and all that, and I don't want him to be hurt. I think that was the idea. Quite simply, we accepted them, we assumed everybody else would accept them. And we were very fortunate that the Director General of the BBC, Hugh Green, he defended us. And when people complained rather down the scale of management in the BBC, he would say, let me see the script that you're complaining about. He would see it, write on it, I see nothing to object to in this. And I spoke to him years later. I was writing a book about radio comedy, and I said, you could have had a much easier life if you hadn't defended us. Why did you do it? And he said, I like dirty shows. He said, roared with laughter.
And what better innuendo could you ask for than Polari? The camp slang that Julian and Sandy made famous. No, it wasn't invented just for Julian and Sandy. Polari had a long tradition and varied origins. Even though Jules and Sand were unemployed chorus boys, that didn't mean Polari was just a theatre thing. Barry Took explains, Sandy Wilson, poor Omi, had Polari thrust down his lugholes in his own latte, and Kenneth Williams, like many others, used Polari to help conceal his sexuality.
Polari is one of those things that's been around for a long, long time. It's my belief that it started with the Commedia dell'arte, the touring companies in Europe, probably Italian. And as the touring companies went through Europe, so they took themselves and their language with them. And I think the whole thing just grew and grew, and actors in touring theatres started to use Polari as well.
I was living with a dancer at the time, and they all talked it, regardless of sex, and sex was nothing to do with it. It was just a kind of professional slang, and I used to know it very well. In fact, one of the girls, particularly, she'd never stopped. It was like, she knew everything, the whole language, which I sort of picked up myself. For a dancer, they'd say, oh, she's got boner lals. That meant she had beautiful legs. And another thing was, if someone was queer, they'd say, oh, he's an Amy Polone, which meant a man and woman.
We used to hear Kenneth Williams and Hugh Paddock talking like that anyway. And we thought it'd be a good idea to incorporate what they did in their private lives into the scripts.
All of it made sense in a sense, because it was reversed, really, wasn't it? ECAF was face backwards, hair was raya, that's hair backwards. It was just backwards words, so that you would speak in public, in the pub or whatever, in private code, without everyone knowing what you were saying.
Exactly.
It was Dolly ECAF was nice face, and it was rotten face, Naff ECAF, and nobody knew you were insulting them.
It was, yes.
Because I remember George Rose saying to me, all de louser luppers on the Striller's boner. Plays the piano lovely.
Popular Polari words that peppered Julian and Sandy's sketches included boner, of course means good, vada, which means to look, dolly, which means pretty, and eek, which means face. So if you've been concentrating, you'll now understand fully their usual greeting.
Oh, how boner to vada, you dolly old eek.
Okay so far? Right, Polari lesson number 2. Omi is man, Polone is woman, and Omi Poloni means a gay man. Lati is house, lallies are legs, nanti means no or none, a queen is a camp gay man who takes himself very seriously, and butch means either really truly masculine or a queen who could pass as a masculine heterosexual bloke with at least part-time success. All of which should equip you boner for this.
I've got it!
He's got it, Mr. Orne. It's coming over him in waves.
Yes, we're going to do Samson and Delilah.
Go on, Jewel. How'd you see it? How'd you see it?
Well, I see Samson all huge and all butch.
Yes.
These great bulging thews and, and whopping great Whopping great lally.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes. And with it, he's got this long blonde wire hanging right down his Jim and Jack.
Oh, it's Jim and Jack.
Yes.
That's your rhyming slang, you see. It's actually rhyming slang for back.
Oh, I see.
Jim and Jack, you see. Off for France, down is Julian and Jim. I won't go into that. So what happens?
Well, I'll tell you what happens. The film opens with him lying there, spark out on his palliasse.
Oh.
And suddenly there's a movement behind the arras.
Yes.
And who comes trolling in?
Oh, shut up. No, yes. Trolling in.
Spoiling me thoughts.
No.
Who comes trolling in but this Polone Delilah?
Yeah.
She varders his sleeping egg. And she pulls out this pair of scissors and lops off his rye.
Yes, I see that. Great close-up of his head. Nanty Ryer. Yes. That is your cinema verite.
Yes.
That is your cinema verite.
Truth. Then suddenly, who's had me Ryer off, he squeals.
Go on, come on.
Then the Philistines come and they mock him, Mr. Orme.
Oh, they mock him. What a figure of tragedy he represents.
Then they drag him up the king's latty.
Oh.
And chain him. Oh. Chain him by his lallies to the pillar.
Oh.
Then he gets his wild up.
He gets his wild up?
Yes,
yeah.
He do. And then with one mighty heave... Oh! He brings the whole laddie tumbling about their heads.
Oh.
End of film.
Bravo, Jules!
Who do you see playing the role of Samson?
Where do you see the description says? Big, butch, muscular, blonde. There's only one person it can be. It's you, Jules.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, pity.
Why?
I saw myself as Delilah.
But did Julian and Sandy actually exist out there in the real world? Betty Bourne recalls the true-life characters that were the living, breathing omipolones that begat the Camp Tucson.
Oh, no. Julian and Sandy were taken from life. I mean, I've met Julian and Sandy actually down in World's End here in London in a rehearsal room we were at, and they were both of them, Julian and Sandy. They were so enthusiastic about being who they were. That was what gave us courage, I think. Oh, yeah, Big May was very much like one of them. She was a sea queen, and she'd been on the boats for years and years, and... they'd have a husband for the voyage. They'd have a husband, you know. Seafood is a Polari word. They were all very married. There was in couples, and there was the butch and the bitch. It was very sort of aping the heterosexual thing. We call ourselves girls because we like that. It's to do with clinging to our youth desperately and pathetically.
So there we are. Julian, Sandy and Polari are indeed an accurate, if comic, representation of a part of British history. Now, I hate to throw a bijou spanneret into the cosy, almost wholesome nostalgia, but I don't want you to go away thinking it was all innocent fun and that there wasn't really any rudeness in those episodes of Round the Horn. It has to be said that Julian and Sandy did utter one or two graphically obscene descriptions in their time. Of course, this would only have been understood by the cognoscenti, those who lived and breathed Polari, or at least knew some gay parlance, but it was occasionally there. Wasn't it, co-writer Barry Took?
Well, yes, of course we knew what we were doing, but because it was in code, only the people who could crack the code would get the joke. That's the point, isn't it? I mean, the whole point of double entendre has two meanings. One is legitimate and one is illegitimate. And more people than would admit it knew it. And that was the other thing that we traded on as well, that there was an awful lot of they knew but they weren't saying in our audience. The fact that it has a deeper meaning and the fact that there's a certain element of obscenity in it is neither here nor there. Because you have to know exactly what they're talking about to know, and if you know, how can it corrupt? You cannot corrupt the incorruptible.
Now, obviously, we can't go into salacious detail right here over your Earl Grey and Gypsy creams, but let's just hear a clip where Jules and Sand are about to perform some music. All you need to remember is that convenient definition of cottage earlier, and of course the word upright has many possible interpretations.
Here, play him some of their numbers, Jules.
Shall I?
Oh, Jules, marvellous. He's a miracle of dexterity at the cottage upright.
Right. We had been to see My Fair Poloni, and we thought, why not? Why not adapt another of Bernard Shaw's works?
Anyway, we thought we'd tackle Back to Methuselah, and here's the title song. Go on, Jules. Does it lovely, does.
Oh, Methuselah, oldest of all the Jews you are, so fantabulous you are, Methuselah.
I'd love to give you more examples, but with you all being so much more worldly wise than 30 years ago, I'm not sure it would go over your heads this time. Round the Horn ended after Kenneth Horne's sudden death in 1968, but that didn't stop Julian and Sandy. Barry Took stepped into Kenneth Horne's shoes for a compilation of Jules and Sand sketches called The Boner Album of Julian and Sandy, and very much thanks to the Camp Twosome and their legacy, Polari is enjoying a renaissance today. The last time Julian and Sandy were seen and heard together was in December 1987 when Barry Took wrote a special sketch for Terry Wogan's Radio Fun Night on BBC One. 3 months after that was recorded, Kenneth Williams died, aged 62. Barry Took says he won't write any more Julian and Sandy. After all, it was written specifically for Hugh Paddock and Kenneth Williams.
Whiskey! Whiskey! Get a shoe! We are the epitome of all that's comme il faut. That is your actual friend.
Can we get on now?
We all laughed at Julian and Sandy, at their campness, at their incompetence, at their relationship, but through that laughter we grew to accept and love that difference. Julian and Sandy were the first gay couple many British people had ever met, and they loved them for being themselves and being proud of it. It is no coincidence that homosexuality was decriminalised during the reign of Julian and Sandy. Comedy history will remember that in their own camp way, they made a difference.
I thought, why not do a musical based on the life of the grand old Omi himself?
You mean Bernard Shaw?
Yes, and we're going to call it Bernie. Bernie is all about Bernard Shaw's unrequited love for Patrick Campbell. Right, Jewel, after 4. Bernard Shaw, I love you more and more and more and more.
Although you like to eat your carrots raw,
It's a bore.
on me you put the markers, crazy about your knickerbockers. Oh, darling Bernie.
The Boner History of Julian and Sandy was presented by me, Maureen Lipman, and written and produced by Turan Ali. It was a Boner-Latty production for BBC Radio 4. Wasn't it, Heart Faces?
The ginger beard,
You're my darling TBS.
I don't mean it, sir.
You're my darling TBS.
That was the Boner History of Julian and Sandy. Julian and Sandy played by Kenneth Williams and Hugh Paddock. And it did come out of Round the Horn. And I have actually it all on cassette where you just get the Julian and Sandy bit. So you can listen to it over and over again and join in with, hello, I'm Julian and this is my friend Sandy. Hours of fun.
On DAB digital radio, on digital TV and online. This is BBC 7.
You're listening to